So, hi everybody, Erin here from Creative Soul in Motion, and I have Kim with me as we're doing an interview for Ripple Effects of Believing. Hi, Kim.
Hi, Erin. How are you?
Very good. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate your time.
Absolutely. Thanks for asking.
I think the best way to start is to have you actually just give me a little background and all of our listeners on what your life is like and who you are.
Okay, well, thank you. So basically, I'm a registered dietitian and a certified diabetes educator. And when I got out of high school, I'm going to go back in time a little bit. I was actually going to be a genetics major. And so I was signed up to go
Interesting.
to college. I took some like pre-coursework and all the stuff that you can test out of. And I actually ended up very sick after my senior year of high school. And so I was a volleyball player and I was all conference and I was on my way to Europe to do a volleyball tour.
Wow.
And I ended up really sick and came home, so never got to play volleyball there. And I thought to myself, what can I do to make sure that I stay as healthy as possible? And so I talked to someone at Eastern Illinois University, which is actually where I ended up going for undergrad and graduate work. And I said, I'm really interested in health and wellness, and this is what I like. And he said, you want to be a dietitian? And I said, that sounds great. Um, so that's kind of how I started off. So prior to that, like I said, I was in genetics. I love science. I actually love biology the best, but I have a chemistry minor, which is crazy, but it worked out fine and I love it. And the field of dietetics is an amazing field. There's so many things that we can do. I did work in a hospital for a while. I was an outpatient dietitian. But right out of grad school, I was a grad assistant. And then right out of grad school, I worked for a hospital-based health and fitness center. And it was one of the newest ones in the Illinois area. And I did that for a couple of years, but then I wanted to be a certified diabetes educator. So I went more clinical and did some clinical work before my job with Jewel Osco Supermarket.
That's amazing. So I
Yeah.
know you've already told us a little bit about your background
Mhm.
and how you got to where you are now, but what made you want to change? What did you realize you wanted to make a difference and a change in your life?
Yeah, well, and that's kind of what was so interesting about it because when you look at something that you're passionate about for yourself, you kind of figure that you'll figure out the career part later. And
Yeah.
that's really what happened for me. So I really liked the whole health and wellness, the fitness and nutrition aspect. You know me with Wild Harvest and our natural and organic brand too, but I feel like when you look at things that you live in your own life, you're just more authentic to figure it out, and the universe sort of helps you figure those things out. And I know that sounds very kind of pie in the sky, but I do believe that. And I do believe if you are every day working on something that you believe in and you're excited about, and you teach people things that you want to know yourself, it's like the perfect storm, for lack of a better way to say it.
Oh, I love that. And I think that's going to be a common theme throughout these interviews. And you might be only my second, but I can definitely sense that just from everyone I've talked to via email so far.
Yeah. Well, and I'm honored to be your second, so thank you again for asking.
Well, thank you. So I know that you've had a really interesting path to where you are now. What inner power or belief helped you believe in your dream and believe in your passion?
Well, I will tell you, my mom and dad always said, in life, you always say yes more than no. And if you don't know the answer right away, you ask for help. And so it's funny how things work out sometimes. I was very happy at the hospital where I was. And this is something that's important too. I actually got very involved in the Dietetic Association at a local level. And I was the PR marketing chair. And I found my job that I currently have as I was posting jobs for our district. And so, things kind of, you end up where you're supposed to be sometimes, but sometimes you have to look for that open door. There's always an open door or maybe a window, but I feel like those opportunities are there, and sometimes there's a little bit of fear involved, and you think, well, gosh, I don't know if I can do that. But I always like that philosophy that you say yes and you figure it out and you know to ask for help, because I feel like people want to help other people. And I think if there's 90% or maybe 80% of something that you love and there's that little bit of fear, I think that's good for a person to challenge a little bit,
Yeah.
and know that there'll be people to kind of help pick you up along the way.
I love that. It's having faith and knowing that you're going to be in the right place at the right time almost.
Yeah,
But you kind of have to
exactly.
get yourself
And
there.
there is some luck to it too, but I feel like you can make your own luck because if you work hard and you are in something that you love and you keep your eyes open, a lot of times things are pretty crystal clear.
Well, it sounds like you had a really great foundation, but I'm sure that there were fears or limitations that could have held you back. Can you share what your experience was with them and maybe how you moved past them?
Sure. So I think when you say yes to something that you don't know how to do, and then you figure it out along the way, I think one of the biggest things for me too is not to be afraid to make mistakes because I feel like if you make a mistake and you learn from it, lots of times you'll get better next time. And I'm on Twitter and I love quotes and I'm always looking for interesting quotes and inspirational stuff. And I feel like when you see the messages that are saying, you know, you have to kind of go outside of your comfort zone, and if you aren't making mistakes or you haven't failed at something, then you're probably not stretching yourself enough, basically. And I totally believe that's true. So it's hard because you always want to be perfect and you always want to do everything so well, but if you take those risks and you do hit a pothole, so to speak, that just makes you stronger, and you
Yeah.
just have to look at it and say, okay, well, what happened there and how do I correct it and right set for next time?
It's the only way to grow,
Yes.
really.
Hmm.
I think
Yep.
that's amazing.
Yep.
Almost looking at the limitations or fears as opportunities.
Exactly. And I think too, if you look for things that you're interested in or you talk to people, networking is not a term that I enjoy, but I love the process. And what I mean by that is I like to just talk to people like, what do you do? And what's your favorite thing? And finding out a little bit more about what's out there. Because even when I was going through grad school, my first job out of college at a fitness center was not something typical for a registered dietitian. And so I was very fortunate because I said, well, gosh, that's what I like and I'll figure it out. And then all of a sudden you start talking to people and you start thinking, well, gosh, maybe those are opportunities that I didn't know existed, or somebody can help you with that. And I think always going back for continuing education, always going back for more training. Those kinds of things to me are fun now, not necessarily a formal class per se, but even a weekend workshop or something
Yeah.
like that to learn more. I
I
think
think
that's
that's
really important.
I think that's a great point that you bring up that I really find important
Hmm.
in anyone's journey, regardless of their background or their career or passion, is this idea of continuing your growth. And I like
Absolutely.
that you bring it up because everyone that I'm interviewing, most of you are living your dreams or your passions, or at least what they are now, which I think is
Hmm.
another good point. But it's
Yes,
the
I
idea
love
that
that.
that you're still growing and it's not like you've hit the end. There's still more ahead.
Exactly. And even if you look at social media and the way we're communicating tonight, I feel like when you look at the things that didn't exist even 5 or 10 years ago,
Yep.
as long as you stay up and active with what's going on, no matter what age you are, I think that's really important because you might discover a passion that didn't even exist when you first started looking for what you like to do. And I think it's important for balance in life too. I think a lot of times we get so caught up being busy that overtakes. And so it is important that you love what you do for your career, but a lot of times that carries over too. Like I love to cook. I love to cook healthy food. Um, and it's funny how sometimes work and personal life can sort of overlap a little bit, but it's really
Yeah.
important that you have something else to do too.
It's always, I actually, like you said, I paint on the side and I'm not great, but it's fun and
Yeah.
it's those lessons of stretching yourself and not being scared of making a mistake.
Exactly. And it's funny because for me, you're painting and I love that. And I actually love to garden. So I don't really know what I'm doing. I'm not sure. Sometimes I'm like, oh, that's pretty. And my neighbor's like, well, that's really a weed, Kim. And okay. But it's really fun and it's something completely different. And it's just, I love to be outside. So
Yeah.
I think those kinds of things are really fun to make sure that you don't forget those two.
Yeah. Life's not all about work.
Exactly. Yes.
It seems like you've had such a strong foundation and belief system. And even though you had those fears, limitations, you were able to move past them. But what was that one moment of courage or the tipping point where you thought, I'm going to go for this?
There's a couple that flashed before my eyes when you asked me that question in a good way, but I feel like sometimes when you get into a situation, you don't always know what to expect, I feel like. And when you get into a job or you get into a volunteer role or even in your hobbies, whatever, you end up thinking, oh, it's going to be like this. And then all of a sudden you're presented something and you just have to put one foot in front of the other. And I know that sounds probably a little cliche, but it's like you can't overthink it and get too far past yourself to not live the moment. And what I mean by that is, okay, there can be an overwhelming project. And I guess as a dietitian, a good example is if somebody has a lot of weight to lose, I always tell them, think of a sack of flour. It's about 5 pounds. Don't tell me 5 pounds isn't a big deal. Try to carry that sack of flour around and you'll be tired because 5 pounds is a big deal. So I feel like if you bite things off in smaller pieces and kind of set like interim goals, that really is helpful when you've got a huge project. There's a couple things for me with the Dietetic Association recently, because I'm president this year for Illinois, but
That's wonderful.
there's thank you. Yeah, but there's something that has been going on, and it's a long-term project, and you just say, okay, well, this is what I have to do today, and this is a checkpoint I'm going to have to do. And those are the kinds of things that I think sometimes we get so overwhelmed with the large project, we forget that it's okay to have those little mini goals to celebrate too.
Yeah. I like that because I feel like a lot of times in this situation, we're going to hear stories about that, that one day, the one meeting. But
Yes.
you bring up a great point that not everyone's journey has those tipping points. That sometimes it is those little steps along the way that add up. And all of a sudden you're there and you're like,
Yeah.
yay, I got here. Now where do I want to
Exactly.
go?
Well, and I guess if I had to name one huge tipping point, it was being so sick my senior year of high school, because that changed the course of my life. And I will tell you, I still love science in general, and I love to keep track of things that I loved previously. So it's not like that's gone away.
Yeah.
But that moment in life that was out of my control, that changed the course for me in a really good way. I'm very fortunate. I love what's going on now, but you do think back and think, well, gosh, had that not happened, then I wouldn't have gone on this path, and then I wouldn't have been able to do this, meet that person, and so on. So it is funny how those moments, you can pinpoint them, but those little baby ones in between, I think are fun to keep track of too.
I think that even though you had such a challenging time, and obviously I would never want anyone to have to go through an illness, I think that maybe you were a little ahead of the curve. I feel like a lot of people I talk to, and I'm sure other interviews I'll hear from, they're finding out or they're having these realizations later in life.
Mm-hmm.
But those moments, sometimes when you have that pivotal event in your life, it cause you to really take a step back and reflect.
Absolutely. And I think I love what you just said too, because I feel like depending on what age you are, it's not really just out of college or, just in your first job. Any point in your life, something can happen to you. And I love stories where you have somebody who went to school for one thing and then they completely changed course and they either went back and got a different degree. I actually have a friend who's a dietitian who that's her second career. And I feel like there's so much perspective that brings, and it's such a refreshing thing to have that overlap for two things that are completely unrelated in the same person. So I love that, and I think you're never too old to learn, and I think you're never too young to change your mind. You know what I mean?
I love that. What do people call those? That's a tweetable.
Oh, I like that. We're going to get off of here and go tweet that right
away. It seems like you've had quite the journey. What resources have you relied on throughout all of these baby steps and, your personal revolution?
Oh, I love that question too. I think for me, just like I said, getting to know different people and what their strengths are and where you kind of fit in, it's sort of like life is a puzzle of sorts, and we all are a different piece that fit together. And for me, I know what my skill set is, but I also know that I want to talk to somebody who's got a skill set that's complementary or completely different than mine, because I feel like if you're writing an article, for example, or you have to do a presentation on something, and you know somebody who is an expert on food safety, or you know somebody who is an expert on even party planning or making a plate look beautiful and food styling, for me, I know the science, I know the food, I know the nutritional part of it, but how it's presented in that food safety story, just as one random example, but you could use any example.
Yeah.
I think the more you talk to people and the more you can, tap into them and let them tap into you, the story becomes richer, and it's going to be a better overall end result for everybody, I think.
I hear, especially from your comment earlier about networking, that what you're really enjoying is connecting.
Yes, that's a great way to say it. Absolutely.
I've swapped those personally. I don't like the term networking either. I think
Oh, good.
it's too structured almost.
You know what? I think I'm going to have to piggyback onto you and steal that if you don't mind, because I love
Not
that,
at
because
all.
that is what it's all about. It's connecting, and you're always, when you meet people, it's fun to hear what people do, and it's fun to hear what gets them excited. And, sometimes it's good to hear what gets them not excited. And, so you can learn from everybody's successes and failures, I guess is a good way to say it. But I love that connection. I love that word.
Um, I know that throughout your journey, you've had all these beliefs, and I love them. I love that you've shared them with us. I think that they're great inspiration, especially to me. But how did these living your passion really change other aspects of your life?
Well, sometimes, honestly, I think I do too many things because I get excited about a lot of stuff. And so I say, yes, I'll do that. And all of a sudden, you have to just gut check yourself a little bit and remind yourself that there's other things that you need to do. And there's a full array of other stuff in life that you should experience too, for lack of a better way to say it. So um, I think it's just, you always have to gut check yourself, and you always have to come back to say, what are you doing? You might be living your dream, but make sure you stay focused too. And I think that that's an important thing. So I think at different points in your life, you're going to be a lot busier, and that's okay, because a lot of times when I'm super busy, things kind of, they overlap, and it's all related.
Yeah.
It's kind of soup a little bit. And then there's other times where there's things that are taking your time that are completely unrelated. But I just think making sure that you're paying attention to not only your short-term commitments, but also those long-term ones and how that all fits together, super important to keep track of that, because there's so many good opportunities, especially now we're so connected electronically, that the amount of things you can do can be potentially overwhelming, I
Yeah.
think. So you do have to filter a little bit, for sure.
I think that's a great point because I feel like a lot of people who are living their passion and their purpose can easily allow that to take over the rest of their lives. And it doesn't feel like work, which is wonderful. But like you said with the gardening, it's good to have those other areas of your life that are separate.
Yes. Well, and I feel like too, you're stronger at what you do that you love if you've got other things to round it out. And so I think living your passion means giving yourself permission to take a break from something that you love sometimes and go discover something else. Because when you look at all of the different possibilities, and you look at how, maybe this one industry came up with something that was amazingly helpful to this other industry, and I can't think of an exact example right now, but I feel like there's so much. Sometimes we get so caught up in our own worlds, we forget that great ideas can come from somewhere else too. So if you keep your mind open and you have a circle of people around you that aren't all doing the same things, maybe that's the best way to say it.
Yeah.
I think you'll have a richer experience, and you might come up with a solution you would have never done had you not known that person doing something completely different from you.
I love that. I really do. And I find that true in my own life. So. And actually, so my last question is, do you have any advice for those that are hesitant to take the leap, to fly and to make their passion and purpose their full time?
I would say, yes, I would say ask yourself what the fear is. Is it fear of failure? Is it because it's an unknown? Like, you have to kind of figure out what it is that's causing you to feel that way. So I'll tell you, at first when I started out on Twitter, I thought, oh my gosh, what if I say something ridiculous? And so I started out very quietly on Twitter, and I actually just had an account, and I looked at other people's stuff. And I kept my tweets private, and I'm like, let me just see how it feels a little bit. And now I love it, and I feel like it's a great vehicle to communicate with people. I love keeping up with the news outlets. I love keeping up with my dietitian friends. I've made some great friends actually through it. But I was just afraid, like, oh gosh, well, what if I don't say the right thing right away? And if you don't, you have to give yourself permission to say, well, you might send something out that people think is silly. And now I sort of do it on purpose. If I see a fat squirrel in the backyard, I'm like, oh, let's go tweet that. That's fun. So you have to have fun like that.
Yeah.
But I do think whatever your fear is, talk to someone that you trust and tell them what your fear is, and they will likely say to you, you know what, you can do it, and it's going to be okay, and they'll inspire you to get a little bit further. That's what I do. I'll call somebody that I trust and say, well, here's what the situation is. Here's all the stuff I love. Here's the one thing I'm worried about. What do you think? And then we just noodle it through.
I love that advice. I think that's honestly the perfect way to wrap it up. The idea of connecting and talking through it without just like pushing it aside. So,
Well, and I do want to say too, I feel like if you're really fearful of it and you talk it through and you still you that gut feeling is like maybe now's not the right time. That's okay, I think, for people to give themselves permission too. Like there might be an opportunity that sounds wonderful, but you're not quite ready for it yet. There'll be another chance at that. So I think there's a balance to say yes, but also trust your gut that it's like, okay, well, I've given it that test, that litmus test. I've talked to somebody about it, still feeling like now's not my time. I think there's a real important balance to remember with that too.
I love it. I think that I hear a lot of trusting the journey.
Yes, perfect way to say it. Absolutely.
It's been my mantra for the last few months. So,
Well, if you haven't tweeted it, I think you should because that is the perfect thing. And because it does. I mean, it just kind of summarizes that you have to trust where you are and you have to trust what your gut feel is. But you also have to push yourself a little too. It's that constant just swirling it around to say, is this right? Is it the right time? And if not, it'll come back to me and it'll be okay at a future point too. So I love that.
well, thank you so much, Kim. I'm inspired and I'm loving hearing about your journey and how you got to where you are. And I really hope that all of these interviews will be feathers of inspiration added to those that are hesitant to fly and can provide that. So thank you. And
Well, and thank you for doing this too. It was my pleasure to chat with you. It was a lot of fun, and I do hope that people are inspired to do it. So thank you for letting me be part of the conversation.
thanks. And just to wrap up, can you tell everybody where to connect with you?
Yes, so if you want to follow me on Twitter, I'm KK Dietitian, spelled with a T, so DIETITIAN. And you can also find me on LinkedIn, and then you can find me on Facebook and a variety of places too. But KK Dietitian will kind of get you to most of the other ones.
Great. And I'll post that obviously, but I thought it'd be
Thank you.
good. So
Thank you
thank
so
you,
much for that.
Kim.
Thank you too.